Well, hello there. We're live. And welcome to another episode of Wombs with a View, Maternal Musings with Sylvia and Jenny. I'm Sylvia.
I'm Jenny.
And today we're talking about a topic that is very close to Jenny B's heart as a doula and yoga teacher with Rock the Cradle and a huge practice of her own. We are talking about the benefits of prenatal yoga.
Yay. There
And
are.
I'll come clean. I'll come clean while we're waiting for people to get on here. I had never took prenatal yoga classes, Jenny.
Well, the question is, do you do yoga now? Did you ever really, did you ever really do yoga? You've taken classes. You've taken classes with me, just
I
not
think,
prenatal.
yes, not prenatal, but I have taken some hatha classes. I think when my other job had some lunchtime yoga program, which I tried. Sporadically we'll do a class. I think my last session with you, when you started an online version of classes at the online during the pandemic, I kept forgetting about that.
Yeah.
I
It
apologize.
happens. It happens a lot. And actually, I had one prenatal student who she's been for 2 pregnancies now with me. She's been pretty she's there, and class had just barely started and she wasn't there, and she's always there. And I messaged her on Facebook. I'm like, are you coming to yoga? And I get a photo back of her holding her baby who arrived a couple
Oh,
of weeks early. So she was exempt from that class. She doesn't need to do prenatal this time.
no, not that time around. It's something though that now that I've been working as a doula for the last 8 years and with our team, that I always say it's when we're teaching, it's one of 3 things that you can do without any previous experience, which would be swimming, walking, and yoga. I don't know. I
Perfect.
don't know if
Yeah.
you agree with that, but
Oh, I totally agree. Maybe there are other things, but even like we know doulas, yes, and doctors are recommending too. A lot of times we go around and check in, and to me it seems like there's sort of there's obviously an in between, but 2 really obvious groups of people who come to prenatal yoga classes. There's the people like myself who have had a yoga practice for a long time, and then all of a sudden they're pregnant and they're like, okay, well, I don't know what I can do and what I can't do, and this doesn't feel right anymore. So they come to try to understand their changing body and how to adapt their previous practice, because a lot of it, not a lot, but much of it changes or can change. And then there's the group of people who have never done yoga and never really considered themselves a yoga person, but they know that they need to keep moving, and or maybe they were like a CrossFit person and they had a different kind of practice, and that practice isn't working for them anymore. So they come to yoga, and a lot of times it's like the gateway. Prenatal yoga is like the gateway into continuing yoga, and for some people it's not. Some people come prenatal yoga for 9 months. Sometimes, often, they come back in postnatal, and then sometimes I don't see them again for 3 years, and then I see them in prenatal again.
so they're pregnant again. Yeah, no, that's exciting too. And it's a place where you can meet community, make community. You make new friends that are also expecting. A lot of you are, expecting at the same time. So if you're
Mhm.
listening, did you take prenatal yoga classes? Or if you're expecting now, is it something that you're looking for? I know with the pandemic, a lot of studios have shut down, but there are online versions, and Jenny will tell
Mhm.
us about her classes at the end, where we can find her. But so did you know your first foray into yoga was not prenatal classes?
No, not by a long shot. I did prenatal yoga. I loved prenatal yoga, but I started practicing yoga. It's normal now to be 16 and practice yoga, but 20 years ago, I guess I'm 37. Anyway, whatever the math is, 21 years ago, I had a teacher, this really amazing, and I went to a Catholic school, and there was a chapel in our school. It wasn't run by sisters or anything like that, but there was a sister and there was a chapel, and it was Madame Bourbonnais. This God, if there's anybody who went to St. Matt's at the same time as me, you remember Madame Bourbonnais. She was kooky. She was kooky because it was, the 90s, and she was doing yoga, and most people weren't doing yoga. But she took us to the chapel, and she taught yoga class to us in the chapel. And looking back now, like, I had no idea how much of a moment that would be
Mm.
for me. And I remember being like, I had a boyfriend at the time who was like this big lug of a guy who was doing yoga, and I was super into it, and he was just like complaining the whole time. So much of the class was like, what is this yoga crap? Which for maybe a lot of people, that's still the way it is. But for me, I was just so taken by it, and I ended up having VHS videos and following. Rodney Yee was like this first video, and he's still around, an amazing teacher. And yeah, I would go in the basement at my house, at my parents' house, and I would practice yoga, and I would burn incense and all these weird things that are not so weird anymore. But looking back, it was like definitely not surrounded by people who were doing it. There were no yoga studios really.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I started there, and then I had a sporadic, not even sporadic. I had a practice, the best I could. And then when studios seemed to, I was a little bit older, I was going to Brahma Lotus. I remember I grew up in Ottawa, and yeah, so it's been a practice for a long time. And then when I got pregnant, I was practicing at Moksha Yoga, which is now Mora Yoga, which was hot yoga, and I felt like I was addicted to the practice, which happens a lot with hot yoga. It feels really good. You detox. And that's another gateway for a lot of people who,
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason, you're like, okay, I want to lose weight or be in better shape. They come to hot yoga, and then hot yoga started to not feel good anymore. And I realized it's because I was pregnant.
You were
Just like that
pregnant.
time, you go to sip coffee or you go to sip wine and you love wine or coffee, and then it just doesn't really go down right anymore. Your body is telling you. That said, people do continue to practice hot yoga throughout their pregnancy.
Is it recommended?
It depends who you ask. It's
Okay.
like one of those things, like you're saying, like, oh, the things you can start in pregnancy. Like you might not start a spinning class while you're pregnant, but if you're
Mm.
already doing spinning classes, you can continue. And then within yoga, it's sort of a similar thing. If you practice headstands, there's not always a reason why you need to stop practicing headstand just because you're pregnant. For me, there's the risk of falling out, which is
Mhm.
a little bit, but it's not something we would start doing in pregnancy. So same thing with the hot yoga. I didn't do it. It didn't feel good for me. I don't usually recommend people do it, but it's up to obviously every woman. And then I always had this argument of like, well, if we can't go to, the sauna or the hot tub, this kind of stuff where your body is so heated, why would you then go into a hot, heated room and
Yeah.
continue to move your body at that speed and you're sweaty and slipping all over the floor? It's just that it didn't work for me. I like when people transfer into a proper prenatal class at some point, but it doesn't mean you can't do hot
Right.
yoga. Yeah,
Okay.
so I was like, yeah, pretty addicted. And then I was pregnant. And then there was Moksha. I was living in the plateau. And then right beside Moksha, there was Bliss, which, Kaylee, I introduced you to Kaylee
Okay.
Crossman. So Kaylee owned Bliss. And I started taking prenatal classes I was taking yoga. But when you just mentioned the community, like I was 26 and I was hanging out with my then husband's friends who we were all just partying. Like they were all musicians, and I didn't have any girlfriends at 26 who were pregnant.
Mhm.
So that's another reason people do this. Another huge benefit is the community.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that's a big one, and then when you're pregnant for the first time, you're looking for that community because you might not have other friends who are pregnant like you or in your workspace or whatever, but this is a great place to come. I always like to say prenatal classes are great to start making your community. There are online communities, of course, but I do like the in-person.
you just feel so normal too, right? And it's the
Mhm.
same with postnatal. I teach prenatal and postnatal. It often ends up being the same group of people. Just like for me, I started my prenatal classes, and then that whole cohort, we just moved into doing yoga
Yeah, like,
together. So we
and you
have
don't wanna
like
stop
two
seeing 'em.
years. You have
How
2 years with
nice.
these people, and it's in the postnatal, you're like, God, you haven't slept in how long? And like you think it's just you, or you think your baby's the only one with gas, and then you're isolating and feeling bad about it. But then you go to, and maybe it's not a yoga class, it could be any of these groups, and you talk with the other women, and then all of a sudden you feel normal. And then like you're nursing your
Mm.
baby and you're like, oh, like I should be doing, but you're like, oh wait, their babies are eating too. And like you just, for me
Yeah.
to normalize the postpartum experience and prenatal too, you're like, oh, my back hurts, like whatever thing you're going through, half the class is going through it as well, so you
Yeah,
just
they have
feel
good
normal.
resources. They might have seen a great chiro. They'll give you some names. You might be
Mhm.
neighbors. We've had people in our prenatal classes where I always go around and ask, say, where are you from? Because you might be neighbors. And so many times they live on the same street or in the same neighborhood, and I'm like, exchange numbers. And our very first cohort of our prenatal classes that I did like 5 years ago, and I see pictures of them. They're still seeing each other now, and they've all had
Exactly.
second babies, and they still get together and have brunches. So it's a beautiful way, I think, classes and yoga and whatever you're doing to create that community, and it's important.
because it does happen. Tell me if it happened to you. It happened to me. Those people that I was partying with or whatever, like the friends you have in normal life, and then you get pregnant and you're the first person of the
Yeah.
group to get pregnant through no fault of anybody. These friends don't always stick around.
No,
The
no.
pregnancy, and then, they're afraid of you in postpartum often. So, you know what I mean? Like they maybe
Yeah.
would like to help you, but they don't quite know what to do, or maybe you're not connected on that level. So you lose friends, then they're
Yeah.
still going out. And so it's nice to not replace the friends, but to have different kinds of friends. And I still have my mommy friends and my friends who are 30 who don't ever want to have
That's
kids.
right.
And so yeah, the community is huge. And when I do teach prenatal classes, it's not necessarily the way that every teacher does it, but for me, I almost want to say the community and the chat is more important than how we're actually moving our body. It's the connection
Mm.
of seeing how everybody's doing and smiling or crying or whatever the thing is happening. And yeah, in pre
Yeah,
and then in.
yeah, and you were saying sometimes after classes, people just hang out, particularly when they have their babies. They don't want to go home just yet, and they can
No,
just hang out
such a
and
nice
chat,
feeling.
and it's not all about doing the right asanas and movements. It's like you said, sometimes your baby might be crawling all over the place in postnatal. I know it's a prenatal yoga show, but
Well,
um,
pre and post inevitably go
very
together.
similar. They do, they
They
do.
are similar. They're similar now for me now, teaching primarily on Zoom. So studios are opening up. I'm going to start teaching a postnatal class at Happy Tree in a couple of weeks. So I was
Mm.
so happy because Happy Tree is one of the first studios I ever worked at. So they have me back teaching mom and baby yoga with obviously like limited space for social distancing. But I can't remember that tangent. Yeah, whether it's in person or online, the hang is always there. Like, okay, we're here and we're gonna hang out. It's nice.
So we think when we talk benefits, like right away comes the physical benefit when we're pregnant. Our bodies are changing, we're compensating, we might be sore. So I think of all the stretching, but
It's perfect, but that's a metaphor for the way that everybody thinks about all kinds of yoga anyway.
right,
You even said the word asana. That was nice.
I did. I used it.
Asana, the yoga poses, and that's why we get yoga classes in gyms and all of these things, and they're good, but it's just the physical benefits of yoga are one thing, and I think that they're enough of a thing for somebody to come and start doing yoga. The stretching, sciatica, any of the even heartburn. Like I remember in the first little while when I started working with you guys, I don't know that it was specific. Yeah, I definitely got messages from you, and even still from Ida, sometimes I get like, so there's Sylvia and Ida who are not self-professed yogis, and then there's Mika and myself who've been teaching yoga for a long time. So we would get messages like, what's the yoga move for? What yoga move can we do for? So like sometimes there's a yoga move you can do to relieve this or relieve that, but I'm like, okay, you can do this, but it would be really nice if we move the whole body and we breathe,
Yeah.
the breath too. So you're
Oh, that's a
talking,
big one. Yeah, we talk about that. People are really interested in how to breathe, how to learn to breathe for birth,
for birth and
for pregnancy. Yeah.
for pregnancy and for calming your nerves. And for so many reasons we can be anxious in pregnancy. Even though I did prenatal yoga, I have to say the first time around I had quite an anxious pregnancy, as many of us do. I always say, like, my placenta, I had anterior placenta the first time and I never felt her kick.
Yeah.
So I was
Me too.
always a little nervous because I just didn't know what was happening. So I had more of an anxious pregnancy the first time than I think I would have liked to, but I think the yoga helped. And I had this teacher who, anybody who's in like the yoga world will know, Jill Campbell. I'll show you, like, maybe I'll put a link of some of her stuff. She's one of the acro yoga girls and she does acro yoga. She is like a fit mama. Her kids are
Okay, what is
older now. Yeah.
acrobatic
Oh,
yoga?
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So you're like working with a partner and you're balancing on each other. And like at
Okay,
the very base, you've done it with your kids where you're lying on your back and they're like airplane on your feet. This is
right.
acro yoga.
Okay.
But these people who have the core strength and the creativity and the practice, they can do these choreographies where it's two people dancing with each other in these yoga postures, and
Hmm.
it's like, if it's phenomenal. Anyway, just to say, she was post, our kids were in the same class at a moment, so she was just barely postpartum and she was teaching my prenatal class. And she was so fit that it was like, there would be moments in the class that were so tough, and like we would all kind of like dread it, but also it felt so good. um, yeah, yeah, I have fond memories. And then the second time around, I took classes with Melanie Fauché at
Right.
Espace Shanti. So that was a pleasure too. Yeah, I'll always remember those moments. I said to the women in the postnatal class today, they were relaxing. At the end of most yoga classes, it's a priority to do a relaxation at the end, the shavasana, and you can imagine what that looks like when you're nursing or when baby's crying or whatever thing is happening. Um, what tangent was I on about that?
The breathing, the relaxing. You were talking to your postnatal moms
Oh yeah,
taking the
they were
time for
trying to
you.
relax. And it was like, if you're in the camp, I could like see on the Zoom screen, like, okay, half the women I can't see because they're laying on the floor and the other half are like, but they're on mute, so it's fine. Nobody knows baby's screaming. And even though it's fine in person when babies scream. But it's just just try to just like remember this moment. And there was one woman who was there who was actually a Rock the Cradle client. And then she's been in prenatal yoga with me and now postnatal, and she's gone back to work. She's going back to work, and her baby wasn't there today because he was at daycare.
Oh,
So, she was there doing her thing too, and just continuing with the
nice.
community. And it's,
Nice.
yeah, it's super nice.
Yeah, so I think for a lot of people, we think of yoga as the, major stretching. But there is the whole mental aspect to it. And like you started alluding to that, like the calmness, right? The
Mhm.
breath calms you down. And I think for people who have anxiety, and a lot of pregnant women are anxious, their bodies are changing. You're growing a human. You want to make sure you're doing it right. So yoga does bring all of that into that. How do you do that? Is
It's
it
so funny. It can be a lot of times just a matter of arriving in that class. You just
Mhm.
arrive, and you've probably felt it too. Your yoga mat is there, and in time it becomes familiar. It's like you don't even have much effort to pretty much automatically relax the moment your butt
Mm.
is on that plastic mat. And then there's the muscle memory of whatever movements we're doing, and we do different control of the breath, the pranayama, throughout the class. Um, but even at that, just being and just exhaling a few times is in itself relaxing enough. And when I was teaching prenatal in the studios, people would rush after work, and you could see whatever job they had, and they would finally just arrive, and we go
Mhm.
around and like, what would you like to do today? And for some people, it's like, oh, lower back pain, or I've been having this, or I'm feeling really tight in my hips or my pelvis, whatever the thing is. And for most people, it's, I just need to relax.
Relax.
Tonight, I just need to relax. And there are many other physical practices that we can do that are, maybe a little bit more cardio or whatever. Not that you
Mhm.
can't, you have cardio in yoga classes for sure, but it's the relaxation that tends to touch pregnant women probably even more than or maybe at least 50-50. It needs to be.
Mhm.
So the relaxation with the movements we're doing are quite relaxing too, but it's the breath, and it's for me, it's following the breath. It's letting your body move at the rhythm of your own breath. So it's a really
Mhm.
encouraging class if everybody's kind of moving at a different speed because they're following themselves. And I treat the prenatal yoga classes like a practice for birth. I'm here telling you to do this pose, but if this pose doesn't feel good for you, don't do this pose. Do the
Yeah.
other thing that feels good in your body. And if you don't know what that is, then in these months that we're practicing prenatal yoga, you're turning inward, and if you're not remembering how to listen to yourself, you're learning how to listen to yourself.
That's such a good point. Yeah. And I love, and I think your students love, Jenny, that, your classes are not just yoga. You are teaching also. They're like
Mhm.
mini prenatal classes every time. Like you focus on one thing per class and you teach them about it. So I think that can reduce the stress too for people, that education piece to it.
That's my favorite. And if it's not a formal sit down and chat, so it depends on the context. Sometimes I
Mhm.
have done prenatal education class before yoga, which is a super good combination. It just means it's quite long. And people really like that. If it's not that, it ends up as we're going through certain movements. I'm like, okay, you can use this when you're at this part of labor. You can use this breath for pushing. Um, yeah, so it's sprinkled in there. And again, I don't know that everybody does it. It's been 7 years since I've taken a prenatal yoga class. 8 years.
Yeah, I mean, you bring in your special sauce, right? That's
Hopefully.
the Jenny B sauce to it. Now, what about I remember speaking to someone in my family about, "Oh, I like yoga. I do yoga, but oh, when it gets to the Om and that spiritual side of it, that's a bunch of, And I was like, "Oh, well, I thought that was, that's a whole package deal." And I know that's
Mhm.
something that might grate you a little bit is that I believe we've taken that out in many practices and many schools of thought. We just have made it trendy,
We've
and
appropriated it.
we have, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, and
true.
it's touchy. It's touchy for me because I'm a white yoga teacher um, who does all the things. Who does I don't know what the line is. I don't like I was saying earlier, I know that there are many benefits to just the physical. And a lot of people
Yes.
say that if you're going to do that, you might as well just take those benefits. Fine, but at least recognize where the tradition comes from.
Mhm.
At least recognize its roots. This is not something that we've invented in Canada in the last 10 years, where there's been 10, 20, 15 years of yoga studios pop. We haven't invented this. When we're talking about breathing techniques, the proper term is pranayama. When we're talking about movement, the proper term is asana. These are Sanskrit words because yoga comes from India. That's how I feel about it. And it's very divided on how to even approach it. Do you om? If you om at the end of class, is it more appropriate or less appropriate? Do you know what I mean? Like some people say, okay,
Mhm.
you're a white yoga teacher,
Are you
like,
allowed?
who are you to om at the end of class? But it's like, well, who am I to not om at the end of class? Who am I to not use Sanskrit terms while I'm teaching? Who am I to pretend that this is an aerobic exercise? It is. There's the physical benefits, but the word yoga means union,
Oh,
and it means to yoke, to unite. So there are different ways to think about what you're uniting with. Maybe you're uniting your breath in your body, and that's fine. Or maybe we're connecting to something bigger. And that to me is the whole point of yoga, is to connect to something bigger. A lot of people don't believe that there is something bigger, in which case they can still do the stretches and still get amazing benefits, and still maybe be okay with that. Yeah, it's an
well, I think
interesting subject.
they've incorporated them. I do these beach body workouts, where on online, and they incorporate a day of yoga into it, but they don't talk about the spiritual side. I mean, I get they don't have time for it either. It's a 20-minute or 30-minute class, but
Mhm.
and that's may not be their public, but they don't go there. And I'm thinking a lot of people just may not. So I think it's finding the school or the place to do your yoga that aligns with your beliefs.
Yeah, and beliefs change too. I think that's the thing. Like,
Mhm.
you can go into a studio where maybe you're going into just for the physical benefits, and often when we stick to the practice, we start to uncover and discover some of the maybe deeper stuff that we wouldn't if it was spinning or Pilates or something like that.
Well, we're so used to push, 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 push the body, right? Push it to its full extremes. And this week I was listening to a podcast and it was all about, how do we reconnect to our higher purpose? How do we know what path we're on? And the whole message was in silence.
Mm,
And I
mm,
think yoga is a lovely way to sit in silence,
mhm.
but we're not used to that as a North Americans culture. We're not used to sitting in silence. We need to be going, 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 get that to-do list going. And then you have your kids and you're moving around all the time. So it's finding that silence. And sometimes we don't want to hear the messages that come either. So there's this push and pull to it, right?
Beautiful. Yeah,
Mm,
really well said. You see
mm,
people too trying, like, the hardest posture is shavasana, which is flat on your back, corpse pose.
yeah.
And you still see people, like, their fingers
Moving.
won't relax. Usually toward the end of class, people have then let it go, but like in the beginning relaxation, when you're there, you see people are just naturally agitated. All of us are. It's a great place to think when there's quiet, but the point, not to shut your brain off, but to just slow things down.
Hmm.
Yeah.
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 So if you're listening, do you do yoga? We want to know, where do you do it? Did you do prenatal, not prenatal? So what kind of, so you're doing two prenatal classes at Happy Tree.
Nope,
You
no
have
prenatal.
no
I'm doing postnatal at Happy
postnatal.
Tree.
Sorry.
I think Lauren does the prenatal ones. I'm doing a gentle hatha at Happy Tree as well, back to back. I'm very happy. And I'm still teaching online, and even as studios continue to open maybe to the capacity they were before, the experience I've had in teaching yoga online has been so amazing that I don't see myself stopping. With prenatal, yes, it's nice that we go and we déplace and we go do this stuff and we look for parking and all this stuff. But I've found that even in giving the option to go outside and do yoga in the park, the people who have been doing the online
Yeah.
yoga, even in postnatal, they're like, oh, I have my coffee and like I didn't have to pack the diaper bag. So I just still get out, go walk, do all the things, but I don't see myself stopping the online yoga. So I have Jenny B Yoga, Ayurveda and Massage on Facebook. That's usually the most updated place, and there's always a session of pre or postnatal. It's just rolling now. There were 10 people in my online class in prenatal, and now there are 2. But guess where the others are?
Yeah, now they're all in
It's always
postnatal
this.
cycle.
Yeah. So I don't
Different.
imagine not doing those classes. It's been a really interesting exploration. I didn't know what it
Mm.
was going to be like. I kind of like panicked to teach online because I'm like, okay, I'm not working, and like these people aren't doing yoga. What are they going to do? So I started with online classes, and they just went really, really well. And we still go around in Zoom, like you and I see each other here, and we still go around and chat. And there's been funny cases of like 2 of the women who were chatting as we go around, and then a few days later they actually realized they saw each other from their balcony.
Oh,
They're
no.
like neighbors, and they've
Imagine.
been taking online classes for a long time, and then they see, they're like, hey, what's going on?
That's it, I tell
And
you.
within that group of moms, they all exchanged, it's exactly what we're talking about, they all exchanged phone numbers, and then
Yeah,
they keep each other up to date with all this stuff, and they'll go on
that's
for
nice.
postnatal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me now I mean, you've talked to me and we only have a few minutes left, but um, yoga is a way of life for many
Mhm.
people. For
Mhm.
some people, it's just a workout, but for you, a way of life. What does that mean for you?
Oh, geez. A way of life. Yeah. It's the way I live. I mean, it's the way I like to eat. It's the mindfulness when I eat. It's the way that I like to treat my kids, to treat human beings around me, the way that I like to interact. And I say the way that I
Mm,
like because I'm not perfect. Sylvia's seen me lose my shit on a number of occasions. I swear, and I drink coffee and all of these things. I don't live this perfect Ayurvedic or yogic lifestyle. I like to think of it as, and maybe that's me appropriating. Maybe it's me just taking what I want and leaving the rest. I don't think that's the case, though. I think that I do my best and try to keep a balance in just like I exist in this society, and um, uh, yeah, the interactions and the day-to-day stuff, the simple stuff, and the way that I understand and relate to people. And I often, will be on the same wavelength as people who are also in that kind of yoga world a little bit.
mm,
It can feel like a bit of a bubble sometimes.
that's a good
And
way.
I consider the way that you are, Sylvia, like you're very heart-centered, and you're very open in that way. It's very, and then like I'll leave my bubble, I don't know, for like family gatherings or like whatever the thing.
Wherever it is.
You leave your bubble and you're just like, not specifically my family, but wherever you end up, or like at a shopping mall or a coffee shop where you're just watching the way that other
Different.
people are interacting and treating each other, and you're just like, what's going on? Or like you just see that somebody seems oblivious to anything outside of
Yeah, we
themselves.
see that online, right? Online.
Yeah.
And what do you, just to finish, do you do yoga every day? Do you practice yoga?
Well, I practice yoga every day. On good phases of life, I have a practice of doing sun salutations every morning. So my good phases of life, which I'm in a pretty good phase of life, although with school starting, I don't know what the heck's going to happen to my routine. But normally I get up and I practice something called Kalari. Well, it's just, it's a martial art that comes from the south of India. And I have a friend that I practice with ideally every morning, and it's been going really, really well. Maybe we spend 20 minutes doing that, and then sun salutations. And so a full hour-long practice of yoga, no, but I do move every day, and then I teach most days, and I get to
Mhm.
move as well. And then just the day-to-day stuff, like being pregnant, and being postpartum, and then just being an actual parent, that's yoga. That's all your yoga practice. It's like that postnatal, when baby starts to crawl away from the mat, usually we keep them in the postnatal classes, they're not crawling yet. But when they start to crawl away from mat, that's their yoga. They're practicing, they come into their down dog, and
Yeah, they're so cute.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's the discovering. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your.
It
I don't.
does,
You've
it
given
does.
me
It
more
just
questions than.
gives us a little view into Jenny B's life as a yoga teacher and how that's not just a job, it is a life for you. I don't think it's that way for everybody, but
It comes
just
into the postpartum work too, though. Like when I go as a postpartum doula with Rock the Cradle, it's sometimes people physically want to do yoga, and I do yoga with them. Sometimes
Mhm.
they want a massage, but sometimes it's just the way that you connect and listen. And
Yeah.
um,
And I like that you say, we're all works of progress, and I think at certain points in our lives we're not ready to go to the next level, and we do take what we are able to take, and then we can then move forward,
the
right? And
next
then
level,
the
this is
next
the thing.
level, right?
Sometimes we don't even know there's another level. And
No,
then you get to that level and you're
we've
like,
never attained.
oh,
No,
there's more levels.
there are
But like
more levels.
even saying the word level, I'm sure people will listen like, what the hell are they
What is
talking about?
she
And that's fine.
talking about? Yeah. Good. So if you are listening and want to take some yoga classes with Jenny B, you can check out her website here, jennybyoga.com, or go on her Facebook page, Jenny B Ayurveda Massage. It's a really long name, Jenny,
I
but
know. If you just put in, yeah, and honestly, my
just type
website,
it.
like
Just
I
type
don't
in Jenny B.
type in Jenny B. Yeah, but
Yeah.
there's like there's like Asian supermodels who are, it's not, those ones aren't me.
That's
The
okay.
adult film stars are not me.
No, not you.
I'm just
If
me.
you are interested in having doula at your birth or taking prenatal classes, we have lots of different options for you. I've got the website here, rockthecradle.com. Our doulas are filling up until 2021. It's an amazing
Hey.
amazing time, amazing fall. So do reach out if we can help you in any way. We're here for you. If you're not sure what you need, just give us a call and we can walk through different options, whatever that may be. Jenny, like she said, that is a postpartum doula as well with Rock the Cradle, and goes to people's houses to help you after birth. And that is very welcome by many. So we're going to stop here.
That was fun. Thank you. That was a good it was a good interview. Thank you for the interview.
Well, I always like to chat with you, and I don't know, are we doing an om at the end of this? Did
Oh
we
my
say
God.
no? Or I don't think it did. Are we?
Om or namaste. Nope, we're going to
Oh,
say
no, no.
bye. We're going to say bye and thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a great week, and we'll catch you next week. We go live every Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. and let us know what you want to chat about, because we can chat about most things. Ciao.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.